Welcome back to another episode of Cobra Kai Companion, and I am Peter. And you guys, today we have a newish writer, at least new for us. We've never spoken with Bob before, but joining us is Bob Dearden. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I mean, if we want to get right into it, why haven't we spoken before, Peter? What took you so long?
Yeah, you know what? It's so funny because I was given your email like a long time ago too.
Right.
It's just one of those things. Like the very first person I've ever met that's part of the crew, even before Hayden down in Atlanta, was Tiffany, who works in sound. I believe she
Yeah.
mics up people. And I told her I want to speak to her as well. Like I want to speak to everybody. It's just a matter of like getting a hold of people and scheduling. And we spoke before recording. I have 500 kids, and so
Yeah.
it's a little difficult.
I get it. I assume there was some anti-Canadian sentiment, but it's nice to know that allegedly that's not part of the deal here.
Well, it's definitely not the Canadian thing, but however, we actually have some ties. We'll get to it, but you attended UT?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas, so that makes us like neighbors, kind of,
Pretty much. I have
you
some
know.
extended family down there, actually. So
Is that
even more
right?
so. Yeah.
Well, we have a family restaurant, so maybe we can link up and send them that way.
Let's do it.
And you actually have appeared on at least two of my buddies' podcasts. I just found this out today too, trying to do a little bit of research. But one of which is funny enough, I believe your interview was literally 2 months before Cobra Kai premiered in 2018. It was with Chris Revel of the Let's Chat podcast. I
Oh,
believe
yeah.
it was for iZombie.
Yeah.
So that's pretty wild because we were part of a network called Core Temp Arts, and I was covering Cobra Kai on TV8 My Brain at the time. And
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's kind of crazy, that
Yeah.
we have that connection
Well,
there.
cross-pollinating in the TV show recap podcast world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I kind of mentioned iZombie, but that's not where you started. And actually, before you even became a writer, you spent some time supervising like some sort of tree planting camp. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah,
What was that
that's
about?
exactly right. Well, it's a job that a lot of people do as a summer job in university, or a job that in your early 20s, if you want to be a ski bum or travel or just haven't figured out life yet, it's a good way to make some money in a short period of time. So I started when I was in college, first couple summers, and then, had ideas of going to film school or something like that, but was in debt and also just a little, directionless and didn't really want to do anything. So I ended up going back to that job and just kind of expanding it over the course of the next, 10 or 12 years into more of a full-time gig and a bit of a, accidental first career before I finally, got my act together and decided to pursue the whole film and TV writing thing in earnest. But I was in my early 30s by the time that, that bell rung inside my head or whatever. So I got a bit of a late start, but it just turns out that I'm exceptionally talented. So, iZombie happened, then Cobra Kai, and the sky's the limit from here, I'm positive.
Yeah, I mean, those are two great shows. I didn't get into iZombie, unfortunately. I think around that time I was probably watching like your Breaking Bad and Game of
Right.
Thrones and things like that. And with kids, it's very difficult to try to squeeze in time for things. And so like I'm glad Cobra Kai is it's roughly 30-minute episodes. So those are kind of easy to squeeze in during family time. So
Right.
were you always into like creative writing like in school
Uh,
before?
I was a theater major when I was in my undergrad years, which was another sort of accident. I started school in majoring in sciences and thinking just of following that sort of a path and getting into, medicine or something thereabouts. But it was the amount of thought I just put into it was the amount of thought I put into it back then too. So it wasn't like a hard direction I was taking. And I got to university and kind of just dicked around my first year and made nothing of it. And then ended up switching into theater on a bit of a whim. But, it kind of activated, I guess, the part of me that was always interested in not so much theater, but certainly film and TV. And I angled myself a little more toward, the writing side of things. It wasn't a writing program per se, but there was opportunities within it to at least, try your hand at writing and directing in sort of small ways here and there. And did a couple of things on stage, but was not good at it. And I knew it and everyone else knew it. So, no harm, no foul. But that's what sort of sparked the interest in maybe doing a graduate degree in film or something like that. it just sort of, like I said, fell by the wayside as I got deeper and deeper into that other job. And, it was a bit of a black hole that I just kept coming back to a lot longer than I originally anticipated or intended. But finally, came back around to the other interest. And it's been like kind of a lifelong undercurrent, but not something I ever pursued in earnest until, I got to the point in my other job where it was like, everyone here is 22 and I'm 32 and maybe it's time to go.
Uh, Now, was it like some sort of writing competition at UT that kind of led you to
There
being
was
on some production assistant?
Not exactly, but there was they have the Austin Film Festival there, which has a associated conference that's very writer centric. And so there's a bunch of the who's who of Hollywood writers that would come to Austin for the week and do all these panels and stuff. And so they do have a competition as well, which I entered and, got a little boost of confidence from like getting to like second or third rounds, but didn't win anything. So clearly, there's some sort of a gap in, in the assessments there. But I saw Rob Thomas speak at one of these things, and he was actually moderating another panel because he was an Austin local and he was on panels himself, but he was living in Austin at the time and he was from that area originally. And I went to see a guy named Hart Hansen, who was a Canadian, television showrunner until he moved to the States, and he did like Bones, you might know, that was his show. He's done a bunch of stuff, but anyway, I read his name in the program and there was these Canadian credits after it. I'm like, I'm going to go check this guy out. And then I saw Rob talk and he mentioned that, he was still living and working in Austin and stuff like that. And then a few months later, the Film Fest did a spring event, I guess, where they had Rob screen the show Party Down. Originally was pitched around town with a pilot that they shot, which is very similar to the pilot that ended up airing on Stars. But instead of trying to shop like a pitch or a script, they actually just, put in their own money and shot the pilot. And that's what he was airing, with a Q&A afterward, and got more into his story of like what he was doing and how it worked being based in Austin and still working out of Hollywood. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out how to fulfill an internship course requirement for my program. And so I just reached out to the festival and they connected me with him. And, not knowing at all what it was going to be, I just said, hey, do you want an intern, whatever that might mean to you? And he said, that'd be great. And so during my second year at UT, we would just meet like 2 or 3 times a week for a couple hours. And it was an amazingly instructive experience because it was almost like being in a writer's room, except without all the other writers, which is in some ways kind of better than being in a writer's room with all the writers. But I got to see like just how his process worked. And he let me listen to calls with, his agent and network executives and studio people. And so it was just this like immersive education in what that career would be like. And also I learned, a ton about how to actually turn an idea into something that looks more like a story, into something that looks more like a script and all that. So one thing led to another from there, and I ended up moving to LA that summer to work on the Veronica Mars movie as a production assistant, and then strung together a few other, assistant type jobs over the rest of that year. And then that's when iZombie pilot went into production. So I got hired again as his assistant there and ended up being their writer's assistant and so on and so forth. So it was all like a lot of very, fortunate circumstances and right time, right place. Mostly for him because I think he benefited more than I did, but I got some juice out of it too.
You mentioned starting off as a production assistant. Like I have heard stories of that where they become a writer. Is that pretty common, would you say?
In my limited experience, it has been. It's a great introduction without the pressure of having to deliver, to be in a writer's room and be around writers as a show is being broken episode to episode. And my job was writer's assistant, which meant I was in the room with them basically as a typist, taking notes and writing down everything everyone says, like a court stenographer. But to be immersed in those conversations and privy to all of that, as well as like all the ancillary stuff, like the departmental meetings and all the calls with people, like you're just around as a TV show is being made, and there's no better way, there's no other way to really understand how that all works. So the advantage is, first of all, you get to know everybody on a level that, makes them maybe a little more open to reading your material or considering you for a writing job than if you were to just sort of cold call or, have an agent send a script or whatever. Because a huge part of the job is just how everyone interacts in this, in this collective environment all day, every day. And as much as talent matters, or, your creative imagination or your ability to write a script, I think a factor of a certain degree is definitely, do I want to spend my Monday to Friday 9 to 5 with this person or these people? So it gives you a foot in the door, and then you also get to see, all the documents that go in from the 1 or 2 page initial ones, sometimes to like bigger outlines to the script, and then the revisions. So you learn by osmosis in a way. So yeah, I've seen at least, I don't know, a half dozen, maybe 10 people in my couple of jobs that have started as an assistant or a support staff member on some level, and then worked their way up and eventually got, like in my case, I got what's called a freelance script, which meant I wasn't on staff, but I got to write one of the episodes of the first season of iZombie, and then got promoted to staff writer the year after. So it can be different paths from, in different cases, but I've seen a lot of people, make their way up through that conduit, more so than I've ever seen anyone starting from scratch and just like blowing somebody away with their, sample script or whatever.
It's amazing. Now I kind of mentioned like some of our connections. I forgot to kind of give a shout out to Robin Burge, who is host
Right.
of the Karate Kid Minute, and I believe maybe it was a year ago, at least, maybe 2 years, when you appeared on his podcast to talk about Cobra Kai. And if I remember correctly, I believe it was one of the guys that spoke with Rob Thomas
Yeah.
about you being pitched as a new writer.
Yeah, I'd seen Rob a couple weeks before, and I think we were supposed to watch a game of some sort, like a UT football game or something like that. And on the home screen of his television was the last stuff he'd watched, which was Cobra Kai. And at that point, season 1 had been out for almost a year, but season 2 wasn't out yet. And he said, "Have you seen this?" And I said, "No, I don't have YouTube. Is it any good?" And he's like, "It's great. We're going to watch the pilot right now." And then we ended up watching 5 episodes and not watching the game, just because we were both loving it so much. And for him, it was, second or third time around. But we finally cut it off after the school fight, the cafeteria fight in 105. And so when I got home, I subscribed and I watched the rest of the first season. And then 2 weeks later, the second season came out. And so we were talking about it. And then separately, he had, I think, reached out. I'm not sure if this story is 100% accurate, but whatever. I think he'd reached out to John, Josh, and Hayden, just like kind of as a fan / fellow showrunner. I guess when you're at that level, that's what you do. You just call each other to, make dates. And so they're having dinner or whatever. And he said, I don't know if you're looking for somebody at the, mid staff level or whatever, but there's a guy on the show I just finished who, I enjoyed working with on that show, but I think he'd be really good for your show as well, because that's right up his alley. I don't know if you have an opening. And they were like, "In fact, we do. And we start shortly. So send them in." And just went in for an interview. And as I recall, like didn't say anything spectacular that blew them away. So I didn't know what was going to happen. And then at the end of the interview, they said, "Do you have any questions?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of want to ask if Elizabeth Shue is coming back for season 3, but I also don't want to know." And they're like, "Well, you're gonna know if you get hired." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to, get too far ahead of myself." But I think at that point, maybe they were just like, "Good enough, let's hire him." It saved them doing any more interviews. So kind of back
Settled on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, forgive me, I don't have it up in front of me, but what were the episodes? You did 2 in season 3? Was it
Yeah.
403 and
my name was on 2 of them. It was 5 and 10. But
305 and 310?
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
it's
Okay.
5
Okay.
and
I was
10.
mixing it up with season 4.
I've done 5 and
305.
10 each
So you did
season.
Miyagi Do, and
You would know the titles better than I do, but that sounds right.
I believe Miyagi Do, and 310. Oh my goodness. All the listeners going to be like, "What the hell, Peter?"
That was
Yeah, I'm
the house
kind of
fight.
blanking on that. No, but because I remember when we spoke with Michael, we were kind of talking about like like the sensor resolution or whatever it was, and he's like, "No, I think that was on Bob's," and so you were 310. Oh,
Yeah.
12 19, right? Or December 19th.
December
That's the title.
19th. That's
That's the
right.
title. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of funny. And with the 310 and 405 match point, you both of those episodes kind of pick up immediately, like right after something happened from the previous episode, which a lot of times those episodes do. But for being like new to a show in the third season, and your episode comes in at season five, were there any challenges kind of coming into this world that was already established? Though you know, like the characters were from the Karate Kid movies, which I believe you were a fan of at least the first movie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, it was just like I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old when that came out. So, it was impossible not to be a fan of that at that time. And it was huge, obviously. And it was, spawned Halloween costumes, and it was in the zeitgeist, if I'm using that word right. So yeah, I was big into it. Definitely saw the second when it came out, and love that one as well. I don't know if I saw the third one at the time, but I certainly watched it a number of times after getting hired, as well as the fourth, which I'd never seen before. So it, got a little intensive with the research there. But to answer your initial question, I mean, it was a little bit daunting to come into something that I was like a big fan of. Plus, I'd been 5 years with the same people, more or less, like a little bit of turnover, but certainly the same people running things. And it got pretty comfortable. And it was also a dog friendly office. So, it was like, it just hit all the marks for me. So that was great. And then coming into a new environment, you never know what you're going to get, but the guys and all the other writers were super welcoming. So, it was a easy transition that way, I guess, from like the, I don't know, social side of things. It was definitely scary to see, my name next on the board for the next episode, which originally was actually supposed to be episode 306, and the guys were going to write 305, and then just a bunch of other stuff got dumped on their plate, so they asked if I would mind, or if I would like to write the mid-season finale, and I said yeah, sure. But it was it was proposed, or it was presented to me as like, this is a big episode, so we want to make sure we nail it. And I'm thinking, I hope you do too, after I handed my draft. But it worked out, and they didn't hate it, and ended up getting the season finale for similar reasons. Like, there was the writers that were on the episodes before that were still writing those episodes, so I was available, and the guys, I think, had intended to write the finale again, as they had in previous seasons, but they were already in prep for the season, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. So both of those kind of just fell to me. And then, of course, it's a collaborative process with everybody to break the story. And there's a bunch of stages after I hand in, or any writer hands in their draft, where other writers and the showrunners, make tweaks and all that stuff. So I get my name on it, which is great. But, ultimately it's the work of a bunch of people at the same time.
Now the episode 305, it does kind of reintroduce some legacy characters, obviously. How much input did Yuji and Tamlin have maybe towards the script, it being your first one?
Well, this is hearsay for me because I wasn't privy to production or some of the conversations prior. But I think, generally speaking, I can say that the guys are like pretty open as far as having any of the actors, especially ones who play these characters before, contribute to how the character is going to be depicted 35 years later. So I know there's a lot of discussion with Yuji about what's chosen up to nowadays, like what's his vibe. And a lot of the stuff that you see in that episode, I think, came from him directly. And when we were talking about it in the room, there was a lot of different ideas thrown around, and we landed on something sort of temporarily. But then with further collaboration and further review, I guess, we ended up coming to the consensus of what you ended up seeing in season 3. And some of that was certainly like, conducted as they were, as they met in person in Atlanta and stuff like that, which is in our case after the room had broken. So it's I think it's one of the more on the spectrum of like how much input actors have. I think we're pretty far. Cobra Kai is pretty far in the end of like, let's just get everyone's ideas and best one wins sort of thing. Tamlin, I wasn't privy to a whole lot of that discussion, but I do know that, she has some sort of ties to Okinawa. I'm not sure if she was born there herself or her family's from there or something, but I know there was a lot of input on the episode prior plus episode 5 in terms of, what that world would look like in 2019, whatever actual calendar year that was meant to take place in.
I believe 20. Oh gosh, yeah. No, that's too far back. I believe it was still 2018, maybe 2019 now. Oh, wait, Daniel's birthday was coming up. So that 2018? Oh my goodness.
Your guess is
Anyway,
better than mine.
I'm a
Yeah.
little rusty, obviously.
Yeah.
Let's okay, well let's talk about I'm trying to think if there's anything from 1219. Well, what about the big fight? Do you remember what kind of like bullet points you were given for the big fight between Kreese, Daniel, and Johnny in December 19th?
Yeah, let me ask you first. Is this a podcast on which alcoholic beverages are allowed?
Yeah, absolutely.
All
Whatever
right.
you want, if you
Calm me
even go
down a bit.
beyond beverages, that's absolutely fine too.
Calm me down a bit, you know?
Oh,
Oh,
that's
I
pretty
screwed it
good.
up.
That's
I
pretty
screwed it
good.
up. I
You
planned
know,
that whole prop thing and I screwed it up.
no, it looked good from my point here for the people that are listening at home. Bob just did the beer cap flick, so
Very,
gonna have
very
to
cool.
look at the YouTube clip for that.
College age me is so disappointed in how that turned out. But cheers. Thanks for having me
Yeah,
on.
cheers. No, absolutely. Coors Banquet too. Very fitting.
Gotta have it. You know,
Yeah.
when I'll get back to your question in a second, but when I first, it was one of my first days in the room in season 3, I asked how the whole Coors Banquet thing came about, if it was like a product placement or whatever. And John said, no, we just thought like, what is, a beer a guy like Johnny would drink, that none of us would, was the implication, but a guy like Johnny would. Meanwhile, that was what was in my fridge at home. So that was a solid indication of, which social strata we were occupying compared to each other. But to your question, the fight at the dojo, and I'll say this is, probably applies to most of the fights. Like we always try to break it to a point, and that point is all the things that matter story-wise or character-wise. When it gets down to the martial arts of it all, we have zero expertise collectively. So, we have an amazing stunt team that obviously handles all that stuff. So what we try to present to them, and there are stages to it as well, there's the first draft, then there's feedback from them, and then we might change some things, but ultimately we just try to give them, the character beats that matter most to us. And if there's any sort of, changes in fighting style, for instance, Johnny using a bit of Daniel's Miyagi Do and vice versa in their fight in 405, like things like that we'll mention, but we don't know what to call anything. We don't, I'll probably get too elaborate in my first drafts trying to figure out each move and stuff, just because I like imagining all that, all the different punches and counters and kicks and whatnot. But I don't know anything about martial arts, and neither does anyone else in our writers' room. So it's apologies to anyone if I'm misstating that, but that's my feeling anyway. So you just try to map it out as best you can, and then Ken and Don take over and do their thing, and it always looks amazing. And then if anyone else asks, I take credit for it.
Now, in that same episode, we have some closures, between legacy characters, with Allie and Daniel, Allie and Johnny. Can you talk about writing some of that dialogue?
Yeah, well, I mean, Allie, I couldn't have been more excited that I got the chance to write some words that she was going to say, just because, same sort of thing. Like when she was first making her mark in movies, I was the perfect age to like be babysat by her in Adventures in Babysitting and stuff like that, and just couldn't love her more. And certainly as the Allie character as well. So that was exciting. And originally it was, I don't know if the guys have ever talked about this with you, but originally we thought we might only have her for that final episode. So the date with Johnny, and it was just the lunch part of the date. It wasn't the whole golf and stuff part. So that was all contained in 10 plus the country club thing. And they made, the correct choice, in the aftermath, I think, to try and make sure they had her for 2 full episodes. Cause if you're going to bring Allie back, you should, certainly spend as much time with her, as important as that character is to both, Daniel and Johnny, as much sort of material as we can mine from that, I think is to the betterment of the show. So ended up being that the initial part of their reunion landed in 9, And then in 10 was still the, the country club business. And there was a couple of passages in there that I think were what I wrote in my first draft. So it was a huge kick to see, her saying those things on camera as Allie Mills. And it was a huge discussion that whole year because it had been teased so much, in seasons 1 and 2. And then the cliffhanger with Johnny's phone and the friend request being accepted and all that at the end of 2 really suggested strongly that we were going to see her in 3. And I know there's a whole process with any actor of, whether or not you're going to sign them to a deal and all that stuff. But even before that was solidified, when that was all in progress, it was a good chunk of the season-long arc discussion of that writer's room.
Yeah, I remember because we had the incredible lull between seasons 2 and 3 with the move to Netflix, and that was the thing that everybody was talking about. Oh, Elizabeth Shue will be back in season 3, and I heard it so much, I got rumor fatigue, and
Right.
and at some point I was like, you know what, I don't want her back now. Like you guys are like not making it fun for me, and so that little using our expectations against us, and I believe episode 303, whenever Johnny was at the hospital and sees the doctor from behind, giving me that at least, I was like, oh, thank God they didn't do it. So when we see her
Yeah.
in 309, I was like, oh my God, they actually brought her back. And at that point, like I had already released all of that, the frustrations from like everybody in the fandom saying that she was going to be back. And so I got a little bit of a clean slate, and my mind was blown, and just seeing her, it was amazing. And I completely forgot that like at some point I didn't even want her back, but I really did enjoy her explaining her side of the story from what we heard Daniel's side in the beginning of Karate Kid 2.
Mhm.
So with 405 match point, again, like you pick up where 404 left off as Terry Silver and Kreese walk into the backyard. And you mentioned, you don't remember really watching 3 too much, right? When you were a little bit younger.
Not as a kid, yeah.
Yeah, not as a kid. Now, funny thing, this is jumping a little bit ahead, so I'll kind of wait. I'm sure I'll remember. But what was it like for? I mean, Terry Silver is like this really larger than life character, very classic, iconic. Um, what was it like writing for him in his return in this season?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it because in the beginning of the season, he's a different man, right? And that was all a lot of fun, I thought, to see him sort of having course corrected from a certain perspective and left all that nonsense behind. But around 5, he starts, you can see him turning back a little bit. He's still trying to hang on to this somewhat skewed but idealistic view of what his contribution to Cobra Kai can be, and what him and Kreese can turn it into, which was sort of their original vision before it all got bastardized. But by 5, you see the signs, I think, that, oh, okay, he's still in there. And that's always more fun for me to write, the little bit of evil creeping in. And when a lot of evil creeps in, that's a lot of fun to write as well. So I had a good time with it. And, Thomas is such a good actor, especially for both sides of that coin, that it was not having followed his career since then. And at that time, because I wasn't on set for season 4, so I hadn't met him yet at that point. But just to see like what he turned all that into was pretty cool. I mean, that's always pretty cool when you write something, and when something's on the page, it's just like when you get a text message and you can't tell if someone's being sarcastic or whatever. When you see something on the page, you have no idea how it's going to be delivered and executed. And when you have actors that care a lot and have a lot of talent to go with that, it always gets like there's always a little bit extra infused into what you had imagined in the best case scenario. And he's one of those guys for sure, where everything was just a little tastier, coming out of his mouth. So it was a weird way to phrase that, but I stand by it.
No, I totally get it. I feel like there's maybe not a huge divide in the fandom when we talk about that particular scene, but can you talk about Terry's headspace and whether he was genuine about his apology to Daniel?
Well, let me give you a broader answer on that type of question. My feeling is, and I don't know that anyone else shares this that's involved with the show, but my feeling is whatever you see on screen is all that's definitely true or canon. And whatever anyone's interpretation is beyond that, if it's not explicitly stated, I think is valid. That's the great thing about stories in general, is every person consuming a given story is going to add themselves to it. So I wouldn't want to say definitively one way or the other, because it is left ambiguous, I think, in the way it's presented. What I would say my personal takeaway is that he wants to believe that he's deep down a good man and has good intentions, but there is a little devil on his shoulder that he silenced for a portion of his life through yoga and tofu skewers, but it's always there. And as soon as Kreese comes back, it's like, a jolt of energy to that devil to get a little volume in his voice again.
Yeah. Yoga. That's really funny. I immediately imagine like that. That's still from season one where Johnny is like stretching with like the women from like the yoga class, which I don't think made it on the show, but we've seen that image of Billy stretched out on a mat,
Yeah.
was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Um,
It didn't hurt that they were all very attractive women, if I recall.
Maybe I don't remember the last time I saw season one, to be honest with you. Not often do I go back, and when like a new season comes out, I kind of jump around a little bit. Like,
Right.
if I think that I need to reference a previous episode, sometimes I'll go back and listen to one of my reviews in case I don't get a chance to watch them at home. But couldn't tell you. Um, there's a line that I'm really curious about. If you remember, if you wrote it or if somebody pitched it, hey, you should say this. But I really love the part where Kreese points out to Johnny, like, oh, well, the sign outside says Miyagi Do, and then he tells him that, well, you better go after your bridge partner before I take the sign
Right.
and cram it up your ass.
Yeah. Yeah, I generally speaking, my recollection is that Hayden had some strong thoughts about how that scene, that exchange should play out. And I can't remember how it happened, but there was originally some other like old person joke besides bridge partner that wasn't working for the guys. So we ended up switching to that. Uh, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm going to stick it sideways up your ass was all me.
Okay, all right. That that
That's
that
like a
that
Bob
really
thing to say.
I don't think that's getting enough love, like I think so much is going on in that scene, but like that's one of my favorite lines from that episode.
Nice. Well, then it was definitely me.
Yeah, okay. Just trying to pull up my notes here. I also see the guys are kind of tweeting right now, so I'm trying to avoid that and not get distracted.
I hope
Um,
it's about this. I told them I was coming on and I got
was that right?
instructions on what to say about them, which I'm not going to follow.
Okay. Um, let's see. Uh, oh, the bar scene. So I thought it was really interesting that, and I don't think anybody was surprised that, okay, finally Daniel gets to tell somebody, and it's Johnny, about the events of the Karate Kid 3. But obviously, the only thing that he heard was like, "Oh, you were advanced to the final round year
Right.
after that we fought." Can you talk about that scene and also Johnny's the first F bomb of the season?
Yeah, well, I can tell you the F bomb wasn't in the script, but I think on set, like as they were shooting, they decided to add that in, which was perfect. And I wish I'd thought of it first. But the spirit of like Johnny being in this bar that's not his type of bar and just kind of hating it all, I think was always there from the story break. The idea that they don't go to Applebee's or like one of his dive spots, they go to one of Daniel's preferred spots. Just as far as the power dynamic goes and the comedy it gave us, I think that was always the intent. And then I've forgotten the first part of your question. What was it again?
Let's see.
Oh, Barnes, Daniel
Oh,
getting
yeah, the story. Yeah, just being
right.
advanced, obviously.
Yeah, again, like it probably came up the room in some way, but I do remember feeling strongly that that should be a point of emphasis because it was so absurd that that was the rule change in Karate Kid 3. And if anyone was going to finally mention it, it should be the guy who didn't get that opportunity previously. And it is bullshit. I mean,
It
I
is. Yeah.
never, karateed. in my youth, but I played a lot of sports that had tournaments, and that's not a thing. It's never been a thing. And so, yeah, it felt nice to call that out and to have Johnny be the one who highlights it, and it just
Yeah.
worked nicely because, of course, Daniel's like, that's your takeaway. Like, that's not the point. Stay with me here.
Right, right. I mean, at the very least, he did probably listen to everything up until that point, just didn't process it after like, well, wait, that's that's not fair, and
Yeah,
so that kind of leads him down this thought process of like, well, so you're not a two-time champ. Like,
right.
I'm a real two-time champ. Like I actually
Of
fought
course.
more rounds than you did. So I
Yeah.
could see his frustration. And I think that F-bomb was earned. I do this thing that after the end of every episode review, I try to pick a line that I thought was really funny, and I throw it at the end when I end the episode, and that was my line. Shut the fuck up, beat it. You know. So I thought this was really great.
Yeah, I love the delivery too, because there's not really a pause between "shut the fuck up" and "beat it." It's all one sentence. And
Yeah.
yeah, Billy comes up with some great line readings.
Yeah, it was pretty good. We're back at the high school, and I like the little nods to the Karate Kid. Now, was it your insertion of the weeks? How many weeks is weeks? You know that by Hawk.
Yeah, I mean, we've started a trend where I'm just taking credit for stuff that I don't know for sure. So let's just keep it going. I think it was. I mean, I've always loved, Daniel as as a fast talking, charming, flirtatious high school kid in the original movie. I think that's one of the sort of I don't know, underreported elements of why that movie worked is this kid talks like he's, a 35-year-old Don Juan, but he's a 16-year-old teenager in a new town. He's just got that New Jersey patter going. And it works to a certain extent. And I can also see why it pisses people like Johnny off. So I've always loved that, that storyline, I guess, the whole like him trying to figure out how to win over Allie. Um, and so that I think that line was just kind of randomly popping into my head as we were looking at the Hawk Moon information. So yeah, I think it's all right if I take credit for it. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, I do forget that you guys do have these cards and kind of like move them around as necessary. So there was probably a card saying that like this is probably a good point where we need to kind of like work on Moon and Jacob, Moon and Hawk's relationship again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's always like, I don't know if you've seen pictures and stuff, but there's different colors coded for each, storyline in a given episode. And then you just try to mix and match so that there's a balance to them. And yes, that was, one of the things. It was actually in the initial story break. It was even a bigger storyline. There's always a condensing, right? When you go from, excuse me, too much Coors Banquet. When you go from like your dream of everything we can fit into this episode to the reality of everything you have time to shoot and can afford to produce for a given episode. So it was thinned down a bit, but it felt like it was time to, get back to that as Hawk was continuing to evolve. And it does feel like, to me, in certain ways, the beautiful thing I think about how the show began was that it positioned certain characters on the surface as, the modern contemporaries of people in the original movie. And then it kind of subverts and mixes and matches. And so you see that there's a universality to that high school experience where the bully can also feel like they are being bullied. And in the case of Hawk, there's, I think, a fair bit of overlap, even though in the beginning, like Miguel is clearly the Daniel of the show, right? But you see a lot of Karate Kid 1 Daniel in Jacob's performance as Hawk and Eli, I think. And so once he's, got a romantic storyline, to me, the parallels with Allie are sometimes even greater than the parallels with, Miguel and Sam and Miguel and Tori and, all that other business.
That's really interesting. Also in this episode, we get probably, some of the funniest moments with the
I do
Johnny's
write really funny
Twitter rant.
episodes. That's
Yeah, yeah,
correct. Yeah.
yeah. The Twitter rant. Like, can you talk about the
Yeah.
when that idea broke?
It's hard to remember exactly, but certainly there's always an impulse to get back to Johnny as technologically inept, just because that's such a core character element that brought so much comedy from the get-go. And his delivery is always fantastic. Like, it's just so dry and perfect, because it's not only that he doesn't understand current technology, it's like he doesn't give a shit about it. So we did go back and forth quite a bit about, like, why would Johnny have Twitter, but in the end settled on, I think, a nice kind of middle ground where he has it, but he doesn't know how to use it, and he's only got one follower, and yet at the same time decides that this is the platform from which he's going to broadcast this epic rematch that's about to happen. So it was certainly like a topic of debate as to whether, like, does it make any sense that a guy who's that tech averse would be on Twitter at all. But to me, the fact that he made the leap to Facebook, that's a gateway drug anyway. So as long as we held it back so that he's not proficient at Twitter, I think it still works. And it's always nice to see the characters that are much more familiar because they've grown up knowing nothing else, kind of giving the critical feedback of Johnny's lack of skill in that area.
I feel like he's using it kind of like ask Jeeves, like, for anyone that remembers that, because like one of his tweets isn't it something like, how does this work? So he actually typed, how does this work, and then hit send, so I guess he was expecting a response from Twitter,
Right.
which was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, it's like
This
my parents that think the voice of the navigation in their car is an actual human that's on the phone somewhere telling you which way to go.
Now, also, you get the Epic Johnny's Badass Mixtape Volume 4, the
Right.
montage. What is it? What's the process like, I guess, for writing a montage? Are everyone just kind of pitching like different sequences, or do you actually get to kind of write out like, these are the ideas I have of what Johnny should be doing?
Certainly there's a shit ton of ideas that come out beforehand, especially with stuff like that, where it's just like, there's no wrong answer. I mean, you could make Johnny do a million different things and it's all going to work. But in that case, like and obviously, there's discussion in the writer's room about any of this stuff, like about the music we pick and about the, the fight choreography and all that stuff. And then there's whoever's department that is, who then weighs in and, makes everything better than whatever we thought of. And if I recall, in that case, the song I'd been pitching since the day I showed up, just because I always, among the people in the room, probably myself and Hayden are the biggest Rocky fans, but you can see that there's a lot of, Rocky references and homages throughout the course of the series. So that makes sense, but just the lyrics always felt so perfect for, Daniel's style versus Johnny's style, even though it was a song written about a Cold War ending boxing match. So I'd been pitching it in one context or another for a while and was so happy that it made it through and we actually got to use it for that moment. But I know that initially when we were just dreaming of, like, we had no idea what the sets would be like or what production resources we would have for it. We had a whole like construction site where Johnny was doing a lot of his business, and it was a little bit like, the Eagle Fang dojo, the abandoned warehouse or whatever. It was kind of that vibe. And then I'm not too sure how it evolved, but the idea of him kicking the waves wasn't in the initial script, but I think they were down in I want to say they were down in Jacksonville shooting some stuff at the end of season 4 for like Terry
Sounds
Silver's
right.
mansion and that.
Yeah.
And so I think they picked it off there, which is just such a fun, flip of the scene with Daniel doing the same in Karate Kid, the first movie. So it's a lot of decisions like that, especially when it comes to montages, because it's such, you're just kind of like on the run, go, because you don't want to spend half a day shooting a scene that's only going to be on screen for like 3 seconds until the next piece of the montage. So you kind of pick off what you can when you can. And I don't know who came up with that, but it was pretty great. And it also there were elements that were in the original script, like kicking the mailbox and bumping the guy off the scooter and stuff like that.
So the original script, so you wrote the mailbox thing.
I think so. I mean, it may have been that we had it in the room beforehand, but it was definitely in the draft that the last draft I saw anyway.
Yeah. John apologized on your behalf, I believe. I don't know if you know, I'm a mail carrier, so I took a little exception to that
Oh,
moment.
yeah. Well,
I
I
just
didn't
thought,
take it. I didn't take it as a a personal attack on the U.S. Postal Service. I took it as a bit of a fuck you to the lady that is in that
oh, is that
scene.
what it is? The lady?
I mean, I don't
Okay.
know why. I don't know if he knows her. I don't know if he just saw a target and went for it. But it's like in Dazed and Confused when the kids drive by the mailboxes with a baseball bat. It's
Right.
just being a fuck.
Yeah,
Pardon
yeah.
the language, but it's just
Oh no.
being a
Yeah,
dick
yeah.
for the sake of being a dick, which is a little bit of, especially when he's amped up, that still lives in Johnny a little bit, I think.
I think at Paley Fest, Billy mentioned a cut sequence from the montage, which I completely forgot to mention in our episode review. So if I do get a chance to kind of bring it up again, apparently he does on the beach run past a couple women that are like laying down sunbathing or whatever. Like he
Yeah.
runs out of the frame to come back and to let them know
Oh
about like an
yeah.
upcoming fight or something like that. Do you
Classic.
remember writing that or?
I did not, but I'm 100% on board if we can get that back in somehow. I mean, that's such a, I feel like I can picture the movie that I've seen that in, and I just can't remember what it is, but that's such an 80s summer movie staple that it fits very well with Johnny's ethos. I think we'll have to find a way to bring that back somehow now that I'm aware of it.
Yeah. When he kind of like explained that sequence, like the entire audience laughed, as you can imagine, and we're kind of like, oh man, that would have been amazing. But I
Yeah.
guess that would have been the only sequence with an actual dialogue, and maybe that's why it's cut. So that's perhaps like
Right.
I don't know the exact duties of the like which editors, but I know like Spencer is an editor and Zach is an editor. Uh, so yeah, that would be an interesting question to ask one of them at one point, at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't participate in the post-production process a whole lot, but every episode is so dense, like we always have a lot of plot. And so what I was saying earlier about things getting cut before you go to production just because the resources or the time isn't available, that's one end of things. But of course, we still end up shooting, enough footage to make every episode 45 minutes or whatever. So there's another culling process that has to happen on the back end. And sometimes you hate to lose certain things that you're in love with, but ultimately the choice will come down to, in many cases, like, do we need it or not? Like, does it actually move the story forward or doesn't it? So I don't know in that case in particular, but if, as you say, it had some dialogue to it, it may have just been like, well, here's a place we can cut 10 seconds. And it literally does get to that point sometimes with a lot of shows that, like, iZombie was the same way, where at a certain point you're just trying to take out 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. With a network show, obviously you have a hard target of whatever number of minutes you have to hit. But even with Netflix, like, there's a limit to how much we can push the half hour that we're supposed to be.
Yeah, if I can like send something to the internet for the powers that be, Back to the Future has this really cool thing where you can actually watch it, and there's like some sort of feature where they will include I don't deleted scenes like as you're watching
Yeah.
along. So maybe after like the show's end, we can get some kind of like ultimate badass Blu-ray edition with
Yeah.
that option where you're watching it, and then like a pop-up will come up, and like if you want to watch like an edited like a deleted scene or whatever, you could do so.
Right.
Like, I think that would be amazing.
I'm 100% in favor. I don't know who we talked to about that, but I can guarantee you that all of my best and favorite lines and scenes have been cut. So I'm
Oh
on board.
no.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite one that you could share real quick from this episode?
Well, from 405, I know there was initially, I think I'm okay to say this. There was initially a couple extra scenes as Johnny is trying to figure out what to do about this Daniel situation, because his progression is a bit like gung ho from the beginning, but then he starts to question it as the episode goes on. And there were a few more like, stones along that path. And one of them was a conversation with Rosa in the kitchen. Like, he comes over looking for Carmen, but she's at work, and Rosa's there and sort of like senses, something he needs to talk about something. That's probably all I should say, because we may at some point try and reincorporate something from that. But it's just when you get to later seasons of a show, one of the little games that you play is like, who haven't we seen paired up yet? and you try to think of new pairings that would be interesting and exciting and give a little more perspective into either character or both. And that was one that I enjoyed a lot. And it also involved some drinking and some inappropriate language. So it checked all the boxes for me.
Yeah, and I just, I really enjoyed seeing Robbie and Tori in season 4, and also Tori and Amanda. I was gifted basically the screeners of season 4, and I got to write like a non-spoiler season 4 review. And that's one of the things I mentioned, like, in season 4 we're going to see people that we've never seen like share a screen with one another, never mind like returning legacy characters. But I thought that was one of my favorite things, was finally getting to see people interact that had not yet seen each other. I think in our review of 4 or 5, I even mentioned, dang, Daniel hasn't even seen like Bobby or Jimmy. So like he doesn't even know if they're better people or if they're still like Dutch,
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
As we get ready to wrap up, I have a few more sequences I kind of I'd like to get your thoughts on.
Yeah.
Let me get this one out of the way in the event that it takes up a little bit longer. Now, in your interview with Robin, if I'm not mistaken, I believe something you mentioned that was like something that, I'm gonna use the term loosely, but like kind of bothered you about Cobra Kai and the relationship between Daniel and Johnny. I think you were kind of like, oh, I'm tired of like them, fighting all the time. Like just,
Right.
get back together
Just
or
make
whatever it
out
is.
already. Just kiss.
Ironically, right? Yes, please. Which I think there's a blooper where Ralph says something about kissing. Like
Oh
I'm gonna
yeah.
have, yeah, but so ironically, in your episode, you write the breakup.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
could you?
mean, I don't remember what I said to Robin, but I do remember I said something to the same effect to the guys, like one of my first days in the room, and then immediately was like, "You idiot, shut your mouth." But what I guess what I was feeling was exactly what they wanted all of us to feel, which is like, just get over the hump. You guys would be so much better together than you are, at each other's throat. But if by like season 2 or 3 they'd gotten over all their shit, first of all, you're undercutting one of the things that makes the show so great. You're changing the dynamic wholesale between, two of the lead characters whose animosity is core to the entire thing. And I understand why they teased us so much. They get them so close to it, and then pull the rug out by Johnny discovering that Daniel's been senseiing Robbie. I don't know if sensei is a verb, but it is now.
You made it a word.
Yeah. And stuff like that, where they're so close. It's like a romantic comedy almost, where these
Listen, Rachel.
misunderstandings, yeah, they keep getting it and keep getting in the way. And so by the time we got to like season 4, it was part of the showrunner's plan, I think, from the get-go. Oh, I forgot to mention, the Big Three has been sort of their nickname, which I refuse to use because I'm a basketball fan and it's got such a connotation in that world. And we have a basketball hoop outside one of our offices.
Uh-huh.
And they're not basketball people, I can tell you for sure. So now we've decided to call them the Sandwich Boys. So if you can spread that around, that would be great. That's their new nickname collectively, the Sandwich Boys.
I will give it a shot. I can't promise it will stick, because
Right.
I was definitely given the credit of that, of the big three
Oh, you
during
were? I
during our
apologize. I
season
just put my
one.
foot in my mouth then. I'm sorry.
It's quite all right. During our season 1 episode reviews, I got tired of saying, because I didn't know John, Josh, and Hayden, right? Which now just roll off the tongue. When
Right.
I would refer to them, I was literally saying like John Hurwitz, Hayden Schlossberg, and Josh Heald, and I was like, there's got to be like a better way. And I'm a basketball guy, and
Right.
so I, like you said, the big three is used very often in the basketball world, and so I refer to them as the big three. My co-host at the time was like, I like that.
Yeah.
And when John, Josh, and Hayden came on for the very first time, they wanted to do. I had this idea for this intro, which hindsight was like really cheesy and kind of cringy now that I think about it. But they had another idea. They wanted to clarify who was the big three, because I was also kind of casually calling Marty, Billy, and Ralph like another three,
Right.
and so they wanted to clarify that they're the big three. And I think it might have been Hayden in the intro says like, well, the super three, or something like that. Like they were trying to like, no, they are the three of any type of that trio. So
Right.
I'll try it. The Sandwich Boys. I'll definitely tweet it out today, and we'll see what they think.
It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
The Sandwich Boys. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's see. Now some of the other sequences. In this one we have the the tattoo shop, right? So Hawk goes see Rico. I am curious to I don't know if there's an answer, but I don't know where Rico is. Did he go, go on his on a smoke break, and then Cobra Kai beat him up because like he's not part of karate, so that's okay and that's off limits kind
Yeah.
of thing. But Hawk's left alone, and can you talk about like that sequence? Because
Yeah.
like I think a lot of us kind of knew something was coming with the Mohawk. Like I think it was just it was like it was teed up for you.
Yeah, I mean it's been there for the taking. I think since he got it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just a target for somebody to like Samson take his power away. And we did initially have more beats in that whole escapade, where they were sneaking in and all this stuff. Ultimately, again, cut for time because it wasn't super essential. The thing that really mattered in that scene was, what you see on the screen. As far as Rico goes, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I think in my mind, in my imagination, I think Rico's tattoo shop is a front, and he's up to some real nefarious shit, otherwise. And somehow Kyler is involved in that in some way because he seems like a guy who would, dip his toes in those waters. And through that underworld connection, they were able to buy Rico off. And that's why he wasn't there to protect Hawk, even though Hawk is clearly his best underage customer.
So if Kyler's involved, it has to do something with shoes, I would imagine.
Could be, or maybe they grabbed Rico, and I'm totally off base, and Kyler just threatened to have his dad shit in his mouth if he didn't
That
exit
could
the
be it.
premises. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Either that, or maybe he asked Bert to shit in like Rico's was it tuba or something? Like
Yeah.
I believe that's a joke
That's
too.
that's Rico's day job. He's a tuba player.
Now there's a oh so yeah, one of the other sequences, and now this is I want to give credit to Jeremy of the Cobra guys. In our review he pointed out something that it went completely over my head, and maybe you could shed some light on this, but there's a sequence where Sam has to talk with Daniel. They're at home and they're talking about the breakup and the upcoming match. Miguel and Johnny has a similar thing. Was there like an idea to kind of in the way that the students speak to the sensei, which in this case Sam is like with her dad, obviously. Was there like a discussion of like, okay, well, Sam will talk to him in a way that like an Eagle Fang student would talk, and Miguel is now like kind of more reserved and I guess maybe not passive aggressive, but like he doesn't want to talk about this fight and just wishes Johnny luck. Like I don't think that's like would have been their character traits, I guess, like in previous seasons.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that was always a big part of the guy's intention, the Sandwich Boys' intention of how the breakup would come about. That they got past the sort of surface level differences that we've known about forever. But the thing that they couldn't quite get past is seeing, Johnny seeing his sort of proxy son get a new dad, and Daniel starting to see Sam exhibit some of the traits, of Eagle Fang / Johnny, when she had been his number one, mini Miyagi Do me, since she was 8 years old or whatever. So that was the idea of seeing those sort of like parallel comparisons was definitely always the intent. And like I said, it's that whole season long arc was, in large part mapped out before we convened as a group. So that's just the guys understanding what the big picture storytelling needed to be for that season. And then, fleshing out certain details was where the rest of us kind of came in. So, things like Sam flicking the bottle cap, with somebody's pitch in the room and stuff like that, just to like put an exclamation point on that exchange. By the way, I want to try that again. I got my cat back. Hang on.
All right,
Just for
here
the
we go.
viewers.
Take two.
There we go. I don't know if the camera caught that, but where
It
Emily
went
used
somewhere.
sitting, that would have hit her in the face. So I'm proud of myself.
And the last thing I kind of want to talk about, we talk about the breakup between Johnny and Daniel, Kreese and Silver, they go out to dinner themselves, and this is possibly the kind of like the beginning of the cracks of their kind of partnership.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the dinner scene between them?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, the room discussion about it. I know that after the initial draft went in, there was some changes there, which I think fleshed out the dynamic of their relationship a little bit more. But I always sort of saw it as it's a little bit like Daniel taking Johnny to one of his bars in their opening scene, where the power dynamic at first in season 4 is like, this is Kreese's show, and he's the former superior officer to Silver from back in their army days, and he's kind of playing on that whole thing. It's like a big brother sort of relationship. And when Silver says to the waitress, like, we'll take whatever bottle's more expensive than anyone else here can afford, including Kreese, I think it is a bit of a like, we're not in the army anymore, John. Like, I'm the one who's successful in life, and I'm going to show that by example here in a context in which maybe the ground will be tilled for you to actually listen to me, for a change. And I do think that Silver is, as much, if not more so, a master of manipulation as Kreese is. I mean, it's like the student kind of surpassing the teacher in a way, because Kreese is obviously, top of that category as well. But Silver's learned everything from Kreese throughout their history together, but also implemented it in the rest of his life in a way that gives him all these resources and power. And Kreese clearly, when we meet him in season 2, has not been able to do much for himself in terms of building up that kind of a life. So I always viewed it as a bit of a power move for Silver to bring him to this fancy restaurant and to correct his drink order and that sort of stuff. And it does feel like, because the way Daniel spoke to him earlier in the episode maybe flipped a bit of a switch, this is like early, preemptive phase 1 of Silver, becoming Silver again.
Yeah, and that led to the line of calling him an arrogant prick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, from
Well,
Silver's point of view, that's not totally unfounded.
no. I think, I mean, uh, Cobra Kai Daniel is definitely a dick.
Right.
It's
Can
it's the
be.
money. Anybody with money on the show is not very nice. So
Yeah.
I'll say that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bob, yeah, thank you so much for kind of giving us your story and talking about, I didn't even think about those episodes from season 3, so I'm glad that we were able to touch up on some of that, and would definitely love you for you to come back to talk about the rise, the season finale of season 4, hopefully before season 5 comes out. Um,
I'd love to. Yeah.
yeah. Now, I know that you're not very active on social, but is that something you want to give out? And if people want to follow you, I don't know if you're going
I
to
mean,
pick it up or.
I tend to keep that pretty close and don't engage a whole lot. So I don't know if it's worthwhile for anyone, but I think, listening to me on this podcast is going to be a treat for all of your fans and fans of Cobra Kai. And that's probably, it's enough of Bob Dearden for the moment.
There it is, and also this is going to be the episode that has everyone in the world calling TV3, the Sandwich Boys. So yeah, we're going to send that out to the internet there.
I'm so excited for the fallout from that. That'll be
Yeah,
great.
by season 5, there we go, Sandwich Boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah, thank you so much for giving.